First of all, I just want to thank the Carnivorous Plant Society and the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science for having me. I'm very excited about my new book and sharing the process with everybody. And I hope you learned something. I know most of you already know about all the plants, but I might be able to share something a little bit different with you all. So I thought I would just tell you a little bit about myself first. If you aren't all aware, I'm from Australia, if you can't tell by the accent. It's far away from everywhere. So if you are planning on traveling, put aside some time. Even when we fly to Europe, it might take us 20 hours, but we usually have a 6-hour stopover in Asia somewhere. So there goes a couple of days of your life. I am in a little town in Wagga, or Wagga Wagga, which it's traditionally known in Indigenous language. It's about halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, so it's in the middle of nowhere. I lived in Scotland for a while years ago, and I used to tell them that we would travel to Sydney in a day for 6 hours, and they were shocked that we would travel for that long. But, you know, that's just what happens when you live in the middle of nowhere. So how did I get started? Well, I did art all through high school, and then after high school moved on to university, where I did a graphic design degree. But in the end, I was always leading more to the fine art side of things. So I ended up heading back into that direction, where I used to paint on canvas, and then I taught myself how to watercolor. So these are some of my early botanical watercolors. It's another downside of living in a little town. There isn't always classes on what you want to do. So I had to teach myself, and most of my lessons came from YouTube videos. So that's the benefit of technology. Picture books were always something I always wanted to do when I was little. I just loved them. And I was about 11 where I read a book by Graham Base, and that's when I discovered that the pictures weren't just there to illustrate the words. They could actually be an art form in themselves. So this was my first book. It's basically just an alphabet book. So there was a letter and a picture on each page. But it's very obvious that my fine art sort of crept in there. They're not necessarily too cartoony. After this book came out, I went and did, well, the opposite actually. I did some fiction books, which are all sort of all that more cartoony style. But then one day I got a phone call from CSIRO Publishing. Now, for those that don't live in Australia, they are an arm of the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, which have some of the best scientific minds in the world, and they just research absolutely everything. The publishing arm, as a result, is Australia's leading science publisher of books, peer-reviewed journals and magazines. They also cover adult and children's non-fiction titles, which is where I came in. Just as a side note, I have spoken to the publisher, and if anyone is interested in any of my books, the website, I've just put at the bottom of the page there, they are able to ship internationally at the moment, but there could be in the future a US publisher, a US distributor of the books as well. So they contacted me after seeing my botanical stuff on my website, and then asked if I would be interested in collaborating with an author to write a book about wasps, which was a very strange subject, but I agreed to it. It was that coming together of the scientific botanical illustration, which I loved, and picture books, so I couldn't say no. So I've since gone on to complete 4 books with the same publisher. Carnivorous Plants will be my 5th. I've been thinking about doing a plant book for a long time. It's quite hard because you can't just make a book that has got pretty pictures and words. You need some sort of hook to get kids actually, you know, wanting to pick the book up and read it. So for a while I was thinking about all the different plants and trees and what sort of things I could do from all around the world. And then in the end, it was quite obvious which would be the most interesting to kids and which ones they would love. I will say though, before starting this project, I knew absolutely nothing about carnivorous plants at all. We'd had a Venus flytrap as a kid, as most people do, but other than that, the only thing I sort of knew were bits and pieces that I had seen here and there on documentaries. And even then, you know, as a kid, I wasn't really paying much attention, but I always found them fascinating. And then in the last few years, the more I thought about it, I thought it would be the perfect story that kids would love to learn about. I was also really surprised because whenever I get an idea for a story, the first thing I do is Google if it's been done before, because it's, you know, if you look up a book on butterflies, there's like 10,000 books on butterflies. So you don't want to go and write another one because nobody will want it. But when I Googled this sort of book, I was really shocked at how few books there were. There were books on like plants on general, and they may have like a tiny chapter on carnivorous plants, and there were adult books, obviously, but there was nothing for the kids. So I thought that was just perfect. I could just go and do one, but I wasn't quite sure how my publisher would take a book on plants. They've got thousands of adult literature on all different types of plants, but nothing for kids. And even by looking at the last 4 books that I've done with them, they have a really strong animal slant. So I wasn't quite sure how they were going to take it, but I didn't really worry about that because at that point I didn't have anything to show them. So before I did anything, I would have to come up with a story and a pitch. So the first thing I had to do was research. As I said, I didn't know much on the topic, but what I did know is that my publisher had a very strong Australian slant. So all of the books were sort of Australian based. So that's where I started. So I went to Google and was just typing in some basic research things. And I was actually quite shocked to find that Australia has more of the carnivorous plant species than anywhere else in the world. We have over 250 species here. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever traveled here, but one thing us Aussies love is to absolutely stretch the truth to travelers. We love to tell stories about what can go on while you're all here. So now I happily tell all the tourists that the plants can eat you too. They don't know any different, and they believe me because everything else will eat you while you're here. So why not the plants? I kept doing this research, but what I found is when I tried to go past that, you know, little tiny snippet of this plant can do that, I really struggled to find anything worthwhile. And what I did find were really tiny little bits of information that were not always correct. So this is from the National Geographic website, which I thought, well, they've got to be pretty good to go on. But I read this and there was a whole bunch of other facts. And I thought, that's really funny. And that would make a perfect illustration. But when I went to fact check it, I just came up empty. There was absolutely nothing to suggest. Well, I thought it was strange that they wouldn't eat the feet to start with, but I couldn't even actually find information that they would eat frogs at all. Something to add about my publisher is it's all run by scientists as well. So everything that I put in the book or present to them, it has to be correct. You know, I can't just put in any old fact. So I spent a long time trying to fact check everything that I was finding online, which half the time it was virtually impossible. So what I ended up doing was I reached out on social media to anyone that had a plant page, you know, and one person led to another person that led to another person. And then I actually found a fellow Aussie on Facebook, whose name's Greg Burke, who helped me shed some light on the facts and myths and where to go to get some more information. So he was really helpful. So I continued on the internet, but I actually found the internet was really lacking in any information. So I had to go old school and headed to the library. And I was just going through books and research papers and whatnot. But among other titles is something that I'm sure you're all familiar with, is The Savage Garden by Peter D'Amato, which I apologize if I did not say that correctly. It only goes to show how important libraries still are, because like most people these days think everything you can find on the internet, and I actually found that really hard. So skipping forward several weeks, I finally had my manuscript ready to send to the publisher. I thought the kids would love the creepy angle of it, so I titled it The Weird World of Carnivorous Plants, with my hook being Discover the Strange World of Killer Plants in This Little Book of Horrors. Off it went to the publisher. Usually you don't hear anything for months, but I got an email back in a couple of days, which was actually really strange. But it did start out with, can we have a chat about your manuscript, which is not always a good sign. There were two issues my publisher wanted to discuss. The first was the tone of the book. She suggested that the book change from highlighting the grisly aspect of how the plants feed to a book that, quote, breaks down misconceptions by shining a light on this unique group of survivalists. She said the book needed to be something positive to get kids excited about carnivorous plants instead of scaring them. I was totally on board to make these changes, and I totally understood everything she was saying. So when I had to go and make those changes, sometimes it just took a few words. So this is an early stanza that I had in the book, and basically, you know, I had to change, it rhymes, sorry, the book rhymes. And I just had to change up a few of the words that I had used and take out that negative aspect and then make it more positive. But some of the sections needed a complete rewrite. So this page, I'm describing a bladderwort, their trapping method, which in the stanza before I have said is quite hard to explain. But in the end, what I did was the second stanza on the left, I just completely deleted. I decided that it wasn't even necessary. And the third stanza, I just rewrote it. And what I decided was, instead of having all of the descriptions in the words, that I would just put all the descriptions in the illustrations. And then that way it was much clearer, and I could have less words, and I took all the negative words out as well. This is actually the final page without any of the text. So if any of you don't know carnivorous plants that are watching, these are like little tiny sacs. I call them bagpipes because they remind me of little tiny bagpipes. So the prey gets sucked in, but they don't want the water, so then they squeeze in the outside and they shoot the water out. And they're super tiny and they're super jet fast, which is, kids always love to learn about that sort of thing as well. The other thing that my publisher wanted to talk about was she wanted the manuscript to go in a new direction, which was a real surprise. She actually asked if I could rewrite the story to include international plants. Absolutely, that was a no-brainer. I was really excited about this change, because it also meant I could add other plants, but it meant as well that I had to go back to the library, because at that point I hadn't even looked at anything that didn't come from Australia. Considering it's so well known, it's obvious that I had to include the Venus flytrap, but I didn't realize how many other amazing species there were all around the world. So the research sort of, you go down a rabbit hole and then you find this and that, and it just goes on and on. But I have discovered doing books over the non-fiction books in the last 5 years that I really love the research side of it and learning all of the new things that I had just never thought about before. But even when I had whittled it down to which particular plant I was going to have, I was overwhelmed with how many colors and shapes there are. Like, nobody, really thinks about that sort of thing. And that was surprisingly, they're so beautiful. Like, most people think of flowers and things like that, but some of these are just amazing. So once I made my decision about what I had to include, I ended up rearranging most of the story. Some of the stanzas at the beginning went to the end. Some that I just deleted altogether so I could fit the new plants in, and things that were unnecessary. And it also allowed me to rewrite it. So instead of that negative appeal, I also gave it a bit more of a conservation slant to the story. So in the first manuscript that I sent, there was a lot of Australian plants. So I had described all different types of sundews. And now this, and because I described 3 or 4, I decided that this I would just completely delete. I didn't even include that. I deleted it. It's one of those things when you're writing, you just have to not be precious about what you've done. If it's not working, it's not working, just get rid of it. So, and that enabled me to take that page out and add another page about the water wheel plant and talk about conservation and how we should protect them in that sort of area. Changing to international plants also allowed me to include the plants that have a symbiotic relationship with animals. And again, for those that are not plant experts on here, in Borneo, there is a mountain shrew that likes to eat the nectar off the, or nectar, I don't know if that's the correct word, off the inside lid of a tropical pitcher plant. And then while it sits on the pitcher plant, it poops into the plant and the plant feeds off the feces. So that's a sort of relationship as well that I could include in the book, along with the woolly bat in Borneo as well. Has the same sort of relationship with another tropical pitcher plant. So if it had just stuck to Australian plants, I wouldn't have been able to put that sort of relationship in. So that makes it a lot more interesting for kids to read as well. So I must give credit to my editor, because her suggestions about making this book better were absolutely spot on. And I'm really happy with how it ended up in the end. So now we've got all the manuscripts sorted and everyone agrees at the publisher, this is the new direction we're going to go. The next part that I have to do is the storyboard. So this is where I have to work out what text goes on what page and what illustrations go with what text, etc. I knew that the book was going to be 32 pages long. That's a standard picture book length in Australia. I know it differs in other countries, but that meant I knew I had a structure to go on. So the first thing I ever do when I'm writing a book is I just scribble in words what's going to go on what page. Now, this has never been shown to other people. This is for my own benefit. So if there's spelling mistakes and scribbles, just I apologize for that. But this lets me just lay out what goes on what page. And I knew that there's some pages were going to be underwater, so they would have colored backgrounds, and then other pages would need backgrounds just to make things a little bit more interesting. So once I've got that sort of planned out in my head, I move on to the next stage and just start scribbling little thumbnails. This is just an A4 printed sheet. I think that's around letter size in US terms. A lot of people don't realize when you're illustrating a picture book how much planning goes into it before you even start drawing the pictures. So even with a non-fiction book, so for this book, you have to think about, is each page interesting in itself? Have you used a variety of plants? Do the plant layouts vary from page to page? Do the plant colors change from page to page? Does the text fit around the plants? How are you going to put the plants in? How are the animals going to be in? You know, there's so many questions that you have to work out. So this part of the process, there's a lot of back and forth and changing and working out what's going to go on where. And you can see on the page before, I have mentioned different insects on each page. That was also another conscious decision that I had to make, that I didn't want just every page to be a picture of a flea or a fly, you know, so I wanted it to be a bit more interesting. So then I had to go and do more research to work out exactly what each plant fed on, and if they were in a particular area, what their native insect was. So I tried to put a different insect on each page, just so it would just make things a lot more interesting. And these are the tiny little details that makes the book in the end more enjoyable, but nobody actually, when they're reading the book, thinks about that. It just sort of happens. So once I had worked that out, I drew every page up. This is what we call roughs. So this is the final roughs that I drew up, and what I would put on each page and how it was going to look. And I just put them in the Photoshop, and I quickly put in backgrounds, because this is what I will send to the publisher. And the publisher then knows, well, these pages are going to be white, they're going to be underwater, etc., etc. You'll notice at the bottom, I have got 3 empty pages. Now, with all CSIRO books, there are extra pages left at the end for information and facts. I love this part, because this means if you're a younger reader, you can just read the narrative part of the story and learn a few things, but an older child might like to know some more. So then they can go to the back of the book and actually get some more facts about what's going on with the actual plants. So I sent this off to the publisher to get all the approval and checks and everything. So while I did that, I had to go back and do even more research for the end papers. The information in this section is meticulously checked by not only my editor, by several experts in the field. So it's not just some average, even though there might be a scientist, it's actually checked by somebody in the field to make sure things are just right. This went back and forth a lot to make sure I had the wording right, to make sure I had the facts right. There were emails to say, where did I find this fact? What are my references? What website did you get it from? What book, etc., and all that. So it's really important, if you are writing nonfiction, even if it's for kids, that you have to keep really good records about where you're getting your facts from. You have to make sure that you're not plagiarizing anybody. So this back section of the book has been checked to its nth degree. So this is, for anyone interested, this is what the back pages look like. You can see there's quite a lot of text involved in this part for a kid's book. I think there's roughly about 1,500 words. Now, in Australia, generally, a picture book is a lot shorter than American books. We generally have 500 words just in the story part. I've read a few American books that go over that a lot, but I don't know what it is here. It's something about short attention spans. So this is the main body, and then it goes on to the next page that has a glossary. When you're writing it, like I didn't realize when it was all laid out, there was going to be all that space at the end, so I could have put more, but at the time, that's just how it ended up. So once I was going back and forth with that, it took a few weeks, and then I got an email back from the publisher about all of the illustrations. Now, a lot of the time, you go back and forth and you make changes, and can you do this, and can you make that smaller, can you make that bigger? But for this book, I was really lucky that there weren't any changes. There were the tiniest little, can you move that to the left a bit, can you, but that meant I could go on to my absolute favorite part of the whole process, which is the final art, which is basically where I get to color in. So this is how I spend most of my days. I'll take you through the stages quickly of how I create each page, and I'm going to use a Pygmy Sundew spread. It took me the longest to finish. As most of you are aware, a lot of the carnivorous plants are actually really tiny. So to get them to work in a picture book, I had to zoom in. So something that's only 1 centimeter in real life is now suddenly 30 centimeters wide in my book. So it was really hard to get them to look realistic. But I also may not have thought through this process before I actually started. So this is my rough that I drew from the storyboard. Now, the first thing I do at this time of the process is I blow it up. I put it into Photoshop and I blow it up to the size that my book is actually going to be. So in this case, each spread in the book, so each open 2 pages, is 25 centimeters by 50 centimeters or 10 by 20 inches. I then print it out onto watercolor paper. Sorry, I print it out and then I transfer it using a light box onto watercolor paper. And that's the process where I tidy up. Like, this is very rough. So this is where I tidy up all the lines and add bits and pieces. And then I will start with a layer of watercolor paint over the top, and then I finish with a layer of pencil. But I can tell you, before I even started the whole paint section, I was questioning my decisions. For those unaware, a sundew is a little plant that has leaves, and they have little sticky hairs that trap the insects on the leaves. This particular drawing has 88 individual leaves, and there are more than 20 little hairs on each leaf. Now, in rough stage, when you're only drawing small, this seems like a good idea. And if you can actually tell, I didn't draw 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't draw 6 different plants. I drew 1, and then I stuck it into Photoshop and I copied and pasted it. So, you know, that was quite fast. But now I had to turn around and draw the entire thing at, you know, massive size. So this is a little video that I did. So it's not a very good quality video, but you get the idea. So this is real time. This is how slow the process is. So first of all, I had to block in the million tiny little red spots. And then I did the tiny hairs, so many. And then I did this, blocked in the surrounding colors with paint. Then I put the pencil over the top in all the backgrounds. And then I add the shading and the details. That's basically my process. This page took 4 days, and that's working between school drop-offs. So basically 9 till 3 with maybe half an hour lunch break, 4 days straight on 1 page. So once that was finished, this is what the final spread looked like in the end. Even though I had put these pages in the storyboard with white backgrounds, it was very obvious that to get the little sticky hairs to stand out, they couldn't be on white. They needed to be on a background. And I wasn't about to try and paint a background behind this while I was doing it. So what I ended up doing is I just got a separate piece of paper, painted the background, scanned them both into Photoshop, and then added them together. So this is how the final spread looks in the book. You'll notice as well that I've got little ants in the background there. I'll talk about that in a second. But another page that I didn't think through was the rainbow plant. So here is my rough blown up to size. I had to take a bit of artistic license with this image because rainbow plant stems are very long. So if I wanted to have the flowers and the stems in the picture at the same time, there had to be a little bit of tweaking about that one. Now, this one I got halfway through drawing and got so cranky at myself that I decided to stop and count. There are 422 individual sticky hairs on this picture alone. And again, it also needed a background. There was no way that was going to stand out on white. So this is the finished page. And the other thing that I had to really struggle with was how to get the little hairs to look shimmery, because in real life they look like little water droplets, but it's very difficult with pencil and even paint. So anybody that actually buys a copy of the book, if you want to go through and paint the little hairs with some glitter or some clear nail polish, that would really make them pop, but have fun with that. You can also see on this page, I've added the insects to the page. It was important on this one because they're actually wrapped up in the little hairs. But going back to the ants, it was hard enough to get the detail on the plants when they were so tiny that if I tried to draw the ants at that size, they would have just been little tiny dots on the page. So what I had to do then is I decided to draw all the insects in the book separate. And then I put them in Photoshop So that way I could draw them. So those flies were maybe, I don't know, 10 centimeters, 4 inches wide when I drew them, but it also meant I could add the details in. And then when I went to put them back into the illustrations in Photoshop, I could put them wherever I liked. I could just rearrange them. So here is an example of that. So this is my picture plant illustration. This is just how I drew that straight on paper. And then here's my ants. So that way, if I put one somewhere and I didn't like it, I could just move it. It wasn't like I was drawing them in the original painting. And then if I made a mistake, I'd have to start again. So that's how I put all those little creepy crawlies in. After this, that means I've done all of the internal images. They're all painted, all the bugs are added, all the backgrounds are added. There's one thing left to do, and that is the end papers. Now, if nobody knows what end papers are, they are literally the paper at the beginning and the end of the book that hold the cover to the pages inside. And they are something that I absolutely love. I like to extend the story into the pages. Sometimes you'll get a book and it's just got a pattern or something boring, but sometimes people do something really clever in the end papers. So if you're ever reading a picture book, make sure that you always pay attention. So in one of my previous books about frogs, I decided that the end papers were going to be an identification sheet of all the frogs that were in the book. And I put them in the correct ratio that they are to each other. Now, to fit them in, they are probably the smidgiest bit smaller than what they are in real life, but at least they're all in the same ratio. So this is the sort of thing that I like to do, especially in my non-fiction books, but I couldn't really do that with the plants. So I had to come up with something a little bit clever. So at the front of the book, this is what I decided on, and I just used those little flies that I had painted earlier. And then you read the story, and then at the end of the book, that's the end papers there. Now, one last thing that I had to do is the cover. This needed designing, and sometimes you have to design a completely new cover and add new images. But this, I was lucky again that we decided just to use the images from inside the book. So I didn't have to paint anything new. I think I might have had to paint an extra bug or something like that. There are a few options tossed around, but this is what we ultimately came up with. So that's the front and the back cover completely. So once that was all designed, it was just a matter of I scanned everything in, I made all the files up, and I sent everything off to the publisher, and then they dropped in all the text and sent it off to get printed. And that's how it all ended. So that is how I spent 6 months of my life. I now have a much better understanding of carnivorous plants and how important they are and how cool they are. I have no ability to grow them, however. We don't actually have a proper grower here that I know, that I was aware of at the time. So the only thing that I could buy was a tiny little Venus flytrap from our local hardware store. If anybody watches Bluey, I went to Hammer Barn. It was really, really tiny and in this stupid little pot. So I put it in a different pot. But every time it would grow, a leaf would grow, look really healthy, it would turn black. So I don't know what I was doing. I managed to keep it alive for maybe 9 months, but eventually the black leaves were outdoing the growing leaves. So yeah, so I have failed at that part of the process, but I can still draw them. One last note I will just say is that if you've noticed, I changed the title of the Weird World of Carnivorous Plants to the Wonderful World of Carnivorous Plants. This is just a little nod to Charles Darwin, who I am sure a lot of you know said that carnivorous plants were the most wonderful plants in the world. And after doing this book, I now tend to agree.
Super. So I'm present to Suzanne. This is part of our monthly webinar series hosted by TIES, the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, TIES has a monthly webinar series, and so does the ICPS, the International Carnivorous Society. And I'm the education coordinator for TIES, and I'm the education director for the ICPS. And I saw Greg Burke there that you were publishing a book, and because I'm friends with him through the ICPS, that's why I reached out to Susie and was so excited. The ICPS is a group of about 1,300 paid members, and we have a growing membership, and we have an evolving perspective on carnivorous plants. We've been around since 1972, and back then it was just plant growers, but now it's scientists like Greg Burke, and we've also evolved into a truly international society with members in many, many countries, and we are a leading voice in carnivorous plant conservation. A lot of speakers have attended this webinar. We have 5 animated videos about what is a carnivorous plant, carnivorous plant care, how to grow a carnivorous plant inside, how to grow one outside, and how to feed a Venus flytrap and keep them alive for longer than 9 months. The first Wednesday of May every year is World Carnivorous Plant Day, and this year, May 7th, will be World Carnivorous Plant Day. It is the 5th annual celebration. And to celebrate the 5th annual World Carnivorous Plant Day, we are looking for speakers to provide videos with the theme of 5. So we're looking for videos like 5 easy plants to grow indoors, 5 fertilizers to use on carnivorous plants. Maybe, Susie, you could do 5 easy carnivorous plants to draw or to illustrate. Another thing that we're really proud about is for about 5 years, we have been hosting Carnivores in the Classroom, which is a grant program that we do every August, and we provide up to 50 teachers $150 worth of carnivorous plants for their classroom. These plants are shipped directly to the teachers. You can be a public or private school teacher. To apply, visit our website, carnivorousplants.org. And last year, these are the organizations who donated plants. And right here, we have Greg Burke donated to some Australian teachers. In addition to live carnivorous plants, every teacher got a 3D printed carnivorous plant of their choosing. If you're interested in doing a webinar or a World Carnivorous Plant Day presentation, you can send me an email. And my other half is TIES. Our website is tieseducation.org. We provide free resources for teachers to effectively teach evolution. We have an active Facebook group, and also our YouTube channel is quite active. We post all of our webinars there, as well as educational short videos that you can play into your classroom. We have English and Spanish full curriculums of evolution. So if you need to teach 2 weeks or 3 weeks of evolution in middle school or high school, we have the entire curriculum laid out for you. We have lesson plans that you can download and give to your principal or your school administration. If you go to teacher materials on our website, you will see free bell ringers or things to start off the class with. You'll see free hands-on labs and activities, worksheets, online activities, videos, and of course, all of our past webinars. Like I mentioned, all of those resources are free. The only thing that we charge for is our book, and that's because we have to pay the publisher to print the book. This book on teaching evolution was written by over a dozen teachers who have had experience tackling evolution in their classrooms for decades. The foreword is written by Richard Dawkins, who's a famous biologist. And right now we have a buy one, get one sale. So if you buy one, you get a second one for free, and you can give it to your favorite science teacher. All right, thank you, Susie, for that brief commercial. All right, now I have Betty's Bay I grow Betty's Bay bladderwort here in Florida because they're so beautiful in the fall. David and Josh and Karen all say, awesome, love it. Love the illustrations. This was at the very beginning of your presentation when everyone is in love with your layout and your process. One question is from Demi. Do you know what background your science book editors have? As this could be helpful for students who love writing and also science. Like, do you know what degrees or classes, maybe like upper high school students should start thinking about or taking to get those two worlds to come together?
So my actual, my publisher, she has a background in English and writing and that direction. And then I deal with an art director who would obviously have an art background, but then they take on people that are scientists or biologists, and a lot of the times, because it was coincidental, I haven't seen what the book is, but it was coincidental that was somebody writing an adult nonfiction. I don't because that publisher publishes everything from kids' books to university doctorates and theses and all that sort of stuff. So they are involved with the whole gamut from one to the other. But I would say anybody who wants to do like we call them a bachelor here, like a Bachelor of Science in biology or whatever field that you want to go down. And then it'd be like, if you like writing about it, that side of it, you could always do a course on just general nonfiction writing, but you would have done so much writing in your actual degree. So by the time you get to the end of it, I'm sure you would be qualified to, approach a nonfiction publisher. And, I'd actually think the publisher would approach you because they go on the lookout for people in the field because, they know where their shortfalls are. They might know about plants, but they don't know about, animals. So that sort of thing. Can I just point out, I forgot to say something. If you go to the CSIRO website, under all of the books that they publish, they have teacher's notes. So anyone that's a teacher out there can just click on them and download them. And I upload them to my website, but I haven't done the plant one yet. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of things to use in the classroom there too.
So teacher materials, do you do that or someone else?
No, they have done that. So yeah, I might supply an extra illustration or something. They're very, very, it's very funny working because I've worked with other publishers that have got no science background at all, but these ones are so very particular. They're very particular about your copyright and all the rules and regulations. So when I did a book on tree hollows, the author actually drew his own tree hollow to add to the teacher's notes. And then I got an email. They were very, very worried because the author had drawn a picture, whereas they usually ask me to draw the picture. And they were like freaking out that I would get really upset that, but I'm like, it's a picture of a tree, it wasn't, I didn't care.
Ryan says, glad you have a spider being eaten by a Venus flytrap on your cover, because that is one of their main prey sources. And they don't eat a lot of flying insects.
We have lots of spiders down here.
And so those citrus plants are a good, Nepenthes citrus plants are a good spider carnivorous plants. I got one with red citrus, and this is super so roomy. And the Nepenthes, the tropical citrus plants, we do recommend for teachers if they're getting our grants. And if the nursery or the person providing carnivorous plants offers you a choice, those are a good, easy windowsill plants you can start growing. Can you tell us about your trumpeter Sarracenia citrus plant spread behind you? Susie, on your board right there?
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Yeah, this was so hard to draw because, as you know, they're transparent, like the light comes through them. So I did this spread. This is how big they are when I draw them, by the way. I did this spread 3 times. This has got watercolor and pencil on it. And the first time I thought, oh no, I'll just do watercolor. It, you know, scientific botanical illustration is usually just done with watercolor. That's how I'll do it. And then I painted it and I went, this just looks horrible. And to get that transparent, like, you just can't do it. You can't do it in a drawing, like, to get the light coming through. So anybody that looks, you know, you've just got to imagine it's sunny and they're see-through and they're all shiny. But that one I really loved. That was actually a choice when I was saying about the storyboard of adding a different color to the page, because the next page, I think the next page might have a Venus flytrap on it. So I needed something that wasn't green, so I needed to add some color to it. So I thought, oh, that's pretty. We'll go with that one.
Greg Burke is an excellent illustrator. He may very well be, but I do know that there are many botanical scientists who are, you know, who have PhDs in botany. But when you describe a new plant species, you have to illustrate it. You're kind of doing it the opposite. Like, you're an excellent illustrator, you did research, but the researchers eventually do have to start learning how to draw as well. So it's interesting. All these, you know, subjects overlap in the real world.
Yeah, I would actually love to draw, because this goes to a point where you don't have to have it exactly scientifically perfect because it's for a kid's book. But I would really love to do a proper scientific botanical book that has like all the different species in it, like a proper book. But I don't know if anybody would ever be interested in that, but I'll put my hand up if they are.
Thank you so much, Susie. Everyone enjoyed it thoroughly. Matilda says there is a market for that. So thank you. That was great. And thank you, everyone who attended this live. You can check out our coming webinars at carnivorousplants.org for the ICPS, or you can go to tribeseducation.org for the Teach Institute for Evolutionary Science. And thank you so much, Susie. It was excellent.
You're very welcome anytime.